whatever COVID is, then I suppose it's like, well, there's nobody because we got you all wearing masks and that's what's doing it. And then when we vaccinate everybody, that's going to be the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
How many people do you think will take this vaccination, even if people say, do you know what, we don't care, we're not having it? There's a lot of people now, you know.
I don't know. I mean, I do know in the hospital, like I said, it's with the flu vaccine, which you don't have to have. It's not mandatory. It's 80% have, 20% haven't.
Okay.
But that's a medical profession. Do you get what I mean? Just
as a person who's in the nursing realm, what do you? Because I had a hunch in the beginning. I thought, well, a lot of people have had the free flu vaccination every year. My dad, a lot of members of my family. I've tried to tell them not to, but of course they do. Surely that will show up as COVID, because that's like a COVID type of strain, isn't it? That they inject into you. Would that show up in a COVID test? Surely.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, that's one of the symptoms, isn't it? If you think that, just like. I remember someone was saying about when he's not vaccinated, but when I've got my son here, by the way,
the son is not vaccinated.
My child's not vaccinated.
That's why he looks so bright and cheery. Yeah?
And I tell you what, in his class, you and your best friend, who's also not vaccinated, are the healthiest, have the least amount of time off for sickness.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, tell me about what have you heard about nursing homes and things like that? There's been some atrocities, hasn't there?
Yeah, I haven't heard.
You don't know much about that. Okay.
Yeah.
And in the hospital, I know it's like I'm pumping you for information here, but what's been what have you seen in there going on with people? Like you said, mentioned earlier on about some person you saw, a lady or something like that.
There was a woman. I worked with her. I worked in a ward that had 6 beds, and the beds are fairly close together, and it turns out that she had COVID. So they shut down the ward for 2 weeks, which meant everyone had to have a bedpan or a commode. There was no toilet in the actual ward.
They weren't allowed out of the ward?
They weren't allowed out for a shower or the toilet.
So they were in prison, basically?
They weren't allowed out. And the thing is, they were imprisoned in this ward. They said, it's shut down. They called it infection control. So they shut down that ward because of this woman who had COVID. I worked closely. I was much more close to her all day long for 12 hours. And so they shut that door saying, this is infection control. But I and anyone else working with her went on a different ward the next day, and then a different ward, and a different ward.
And they didn't say anything about that?
They didn't say, like, you've worked closest to her, so you should therefore
You've been cleaning her poo up, her wee, her sick.
Giving her personal care. And I was actually doing some breathing exercises with her, sitting down with her, because she was petrified. She was off the ceiling with anxiety. So I was sitting there with her, just kind of calming her down, just talking to her. And so then after that day, I was allowed to go and work on 4 different wards. And I was sent to a different ward the next day, and then you get sent places, you don't get asked, but then I was sent on and on. So even though apparently they could be infectious and they close the door, it's like I'm above that. I don't ever get infection.
God alive. From what we were told, there'd be millions of coffins lining up coming out of these hospitals. They terrified people.
Yeah. I mean, the ward, they did actually have allocated COVID wards, and like I said, there was only 3 of them had COVID patients in compared to the numbers put aside that weren't there. And in the wards, this woman I did work with went down to the COVID ward, and I saw her 2 months later. I worked in the COVID ward, I went down there, and I thought it was atrocious. They was also stuck in bays, and she looked, can I swear?
Say, fucking swear, yeah.
She looked fucked. She looked really fucked compared to when I saw her. And she said, they won't let me out. I said, what do you mean they won't let you out? And she said, they're keeping me here because she had carers at home. She was disabled. She had carers at home. And the carers who were coming round her house twice a day, whatever, did turn around and they said, we're not coming round to the home to give personal care to this woman unless she's had a COVID swab to prove that she hasn't got it anymore. And the hospital wouldn't give it to her.
Jesus. And I want to ask you, I'm glad I remembered, you might not know about this, but those all, I mean, well, not Lockheed Martin, or one of those big companies started making bloody breathing apparatus. What were they called? What they call those machines? I've completely forgotten what it is. You know,
the ventilators.
Ventilators, that's it. Ventilators were going to be sticking, and there was a company, they were offering $39,000 into the American hospitals if they put someone on a ventilator. There was people going in there having their lungs blown up because they were putting on ventilators when they shouldn't have been, right?
Yeah.
But I wondered, did you know anything about ventilators in that hospital? Did they have them anywhere that you saw and they were sticking people on them or not?
Not where I work normally. Yeah. But I do know that going back to that COVID ward, I was chatting to the nurses when I was on there, and that I said, like, how's it been on here? How have you been? What's the patients like? How many people have died? I'm a bit grim, but I just said, how many people have died? And have they all died of COVID? And they said, some people have recovered, gone home, but the people that have died have not died of COVID, they've died with COVID. So they died of a heart disease because their heart was something wrong with their heart because their heart, So the COVID just brought it on, a bit like having flu, and it knocks down your immune system, and that's the thing that kills you when you've got AIDS. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So these people died of what was already wrong with them. So all the people that had died already had a pre-existing disease or illness or something that was like really weak immune system, and it was just the final straw. But they did not die of the COVID. They died of the pre-existing thing they had.
So they're still not talking about lifting the restrictions in the hospitals?
No.
Even though there's no COVID, right?
There's no COVID, and since there's no COVID, before we used to wear masks just on our ward and then take the mask off so if we were walking around the hospital, and then since we've got no numbers in the hospital, we're made to wear masks the whole time from the minute we walk in the hospital door.
So what's going on in your opinion? All these people wearing masks around you, they're terrified. I can see they're shitting themselves, yeah? And there's nothing out there, right? There's nothing out there to catch by this, before I can gather, yeah? So where do you think it's going? What do you think's happening?
I don't know, but I do know that I was in the recycling centre the other day, and there was a one-way system around the recycling centre.
I got thrown out, by the way. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
And in the recycling centre, I was in the book section, and there was one middle shelf right in the middle, and there was a one-way system. You had to walk round this shelf to the books, and I was standing near the end of the one-way system, which was only like 8 foot. And this woman come along with her mask on, and she said, "Excuse me, can you mind out my way?" And there was no one actually behind her, and it was only
because you didn't have a mask on.
Because I didn't have a mask on. She said, "Excuse me, can you mind out my way?" And I went, and I just took one step back, like thinking it was the normal way out. And she went, "No, I want you to move 2 meters."
Right.
And so. I did move 2 meters, but I was just like looking at her. She could have walked back. I mean, it was literally the length of your desk. She could have walked back round. There was no one round the other side, but she was. And I just thought, Jesus.
And here's the other thing I want to say: if someone's got a mask on, right, and they believe that the masks are protecting them, I mean, this is It's like they believe the masks are protecting them. Why would they be frightened of someone without a mask on if they're protected?
Yeah.
It's insanity. Yeah. You know, a lady my wife knows went to see her family in London. Yeah. And for Christmas she drove all the way up there. She knocked the door. They said, "Oh, have you got him vaccinated yet, your son?" She said, "No." She said, "Sorry." Her family said, "Sorry, you can't come in. We're not letting you in."
Wow.
She drove back down from here from London. Yeah. Now, my question is this: if their family's vaccinated, and they believe the vaccine works, which they obviously do, presumably, well, why would they be frightened of someone without a vaccination?
I know. He had the same when he was a baby. We went into hospital. I can't remember what went on for you, but he went into hospital overnight, and they put us in a side room. They put us in an isolated room because he wasn't vaccinated. So you just go, hang on a minute, if you've got a vaccination and this thing is like super protecting you from everything that's out there, this contagious disease that my son has in hospital, then why is it not protecting you now?
David Icke puts it very well. I'm speaking with David Icke's son in Birmingham tomorrow, Gareth, and Piers Coben and some other sort of warriors, really. And David Icke put it very well. He's been banned from everywhere now, and he said it's the totalitarian tiptoe. And he said what they're doing this time is, with the masks and everything, they're choking you until you give in, and then they're letting you free, right? And then another lockdown, they'll choke you, and then they'll let you free. But every time they let you free, your liberties and your freedoms have been that little bit more taken away each time. And my wife knows a lady from Italy who she was speaking to just yesterday. By the way, what's the date today, so we can just make a recording of this? 14th of August today, by the way. So the lady from Italy, she's speaking to people in Italy today. In Italy now, if your children are in school and a couple of them have got COVID, right? Guess what? They don't let the kids back home. They take them somewhere, in inverted commas.
Oh my God.
Right? And quarantine them. Now you think of that. And their parents can't even go and see them. This is getting crazier and crazier. And I'm warning everyone right here, and I'm telling people this. I'm freaking out because it's like, I can see where this is going.
I can see where it's going. It scares the shit out of me where I can see this going. This is just like, this is beyond, and I'm scared that people can't see it. That's what terrifies me.
And the fear of death is a huge fear, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the fear of criticism from family and friends and other people on the street, you know. I'm very worried about it. I was in a shop the other day, and over the loudspeaker it kept saying, the government has advised people to only use their cards for payment or tapping, you know, whatever it's called, right? Advised people. And I went to the desk and I thought, I don't want to use my card here today. Do you know why? Because if I use my card here today and someone's got COVID in here, in 2 weeks' time they're going to round me up.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So hang on a minute. Sorry, right? So I said to the lady at the cash, I said, I've heard him on the loudspeaker. I had heard it. I said, I've heard that it's not illegal to use cash anywhere. So will you take cash? She said, oh yes, you know. It's like, well, why didn't he say that over the loudspeaker?
Yeah, but I can take cash anyway.
Yeah. But why? Because they're using this. Oh my God, you touch cash, you're going to get COVID, right? They're using this to bring in cashless, and then they'll bring the microchip in next, and you won't even be able to go to your bank.
I know.
This is terrifying.
I know, it is terrifying. You know? Like that in Lidl's, actually. They play the same tape over and over again. Now wash your hands. Now wash your hands. And like Lidl's I went in doesn't even have a sink. It's just like, how the fuck am I going to wash my hands then? You know. And
that stuff you put on your hands, when my father was dying in hospital, he was dying lots of times in hospital, God, but I used to have to use that stuff, you know. Please use that stuff, you know, blah, blah, and there wasn't even COVID on. I've heard how bad that stuff is for you, you know.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be really bad, goes straight into your bloodstream and does you terrible damage, you know.
I don't use that stuff.
There's someone in the hospital that doesn't use that stuff. Someone works in the hospital. My gosh. Now, anything you want to say before we close? Anything else about hospitals and what's going on? And